When you drink apple cider vinegar before a meal, particularly one heavy in carbohydrates, you're doing something far more consequential than following a wellness trend. You're intervening at the precise moment where chaos tends to enter the system. From a physiological standpoint, the acetic acid in apple cider vinegar improves insulin sensitivity and slows the rate at which food leaves the stomach. That means glucose doesn't surge violently into the bloodstream. Instead, it arrives in an orderly fashion. And order, biologically speaking, is never trivial. Now consider what happens when blood sugar spikes. Energy rises rapidly, but it doesn't stay there. It crashes. And when it crashes, something subtle but profound occurs: patience thins, focus deteriorates, and impulsive behavior increases. This isn't a moral failing, it's chemistry. The brain, deprived of stable fuel, begins to prioritize immediate relief over long-term intention. You reach for more sugar, more stimulation, more distraction. In other words, metabolic instability quietly erodes self-discipline. Drinking apple cider vinegar 15 to 30 minutes before a meal interrupts that pattern. Studies have consistently shown reduced post-meal glucose and insulin responses, especially in individuals with insulin resistance. But the deeper implication is psychological. By stabilizing blood sugar, you're protecting your capacity to make deliberate choices after you eat. You're less reactive. Less prone to the internal bargaining that says, just one more won't hurt. Over time, that matters more than people realize. Small physiological advantages, applied consistently, compound into behavioral stability. There's also a symbolic element here that shouldn't be ignored. Timing apple cider vinegar before a meal is an act of voluntary restraint. You're choosing to prepare the body rather than react to its consequences. That single decision reinforces a broader pattern: anticipate rather than repair, structure rather than scramble. And that mindset, once adopted, tends to generalize. It spills into how you work, how you eat, and how you manage responsibility. Of course, this isn't about excess. It's about precision, dilution, moderation, and consistency. Biology rewards respect for limits. But when used properly, this small ritual becomes a daily rehearsal for discipline itself. Stabilize the body before you feed it, and you may find you're also stabilizing the person who has to live with the consequences of every choice that follows. When apple cider vinegar is taken in the morning, before food, before distraction, before the world makes its demands, it functions less like a cleanse and more like a signal. Despite the popular language of detoxification, the body doesn't need rescuing from poison, it needs direction. And acetic acid, when introduced early in the day, appears to offer exactly that. Research suggests that morning consumption can improve insulin responsiveness and reduce the magnitude of glucose spikes later in the day. In other words, the body learns, very early on, how to handle what's coming. That matters because mornings are not neutral. They establish momentum. If your physiology begins the day in a reactive state, already chasing energy, already compensating for instability, you spend the remaining hours negotiating with fatigue and impulse. Appetite becomes louder. Cravings become more persuasive. Attention fragments. But when metabolic signals are calm and orderly, the day unfolds differently. Hunger is measured, not urgent. Energy is available, not volatile. The system is prepared, not defensive. There's a psychological parallel here that's difficult to ignore. The first action of the day, however small, often defines the internal narrative that follows. A deliberate morning practice, something restrained, intentional, and unglamorous, creates an identity loop. You're no longer someone who waits for motivation to arrive, you're someone who acts before chaos does. Drinking diluted apple cider vinegar in the morning isn't heroic. That's precisely why it works. It's a quiet assertion that preparation matters more than reaction. Importantly, this isn't about suppression or denial. It's about alignment. The body responds to early cues with long-term adjustments. Studies indicate that even modest improvements in morning insulin sensitivity can influence appetite regulation across the entire day. And once appetite is regulated, decision-making improves. Fewer internal battles mean more cognitive resources available for work, creativity, and responsibility. Of course, precision still matters. Proper dilution protects the digestive tract and teeth. Excess undermines the very stability you're trying to cultivate. The principle remains consistent, enough to signal, not enough to overwhelm. Biology favors restraint paired with consistency. And perhaps that's the real lesson embedded in this practice. Start the day by telling your body, and by extension, your mind, that order comes first. Do that often enough, and you won't need to chase discipline. It will already be waiting for you when the day begins. When apple cider vinegar is taken before bed, its role shifts from preparation to regulation. This isn't about stimulation or appetite control in the obvious sense, it's about what happens when consciousness recedes and the body takes over the work of repair. Sleep is not passive. It's an active biological negotiation, where hormones recalibrate, tissues recover, and the metabolic ledger of the day is quietly balanced. Introducing a small, well-diluted amount of apple cider vinegar at this point appears to influence that overnight process, particularly in relation to fasting blood sugar the following morning. Some studies suggest that bedtime consumption can modestly improve morning glucose levels, especially in individuals who struggle with elevated fasting blood sugar. That's significant because overnight regulation reflects how well the system has learned to maintain order without constant input. If blood sugar drifts upward during sleep, the body wakes already compromised, hungry, foggy, and predisposed to poor choices. When regulation improves, mornings become steadier, less urgent, and more deliberate. And again, the physiological change precedes the psychological one. There's also a deeper pattern here worth paying attention to. What you do before sleep often signals how seriously you take recovery. Many people end the day with stimulation, screens, sugar, noise, then wonder why rest feels shallow. A restrained bedtime practice, something subtle and intentional, communicates a different message. It says the day is being closed properly, not abandoned mid-sentence. That sense of completion matters. The nervous system responds to it, and so does the mind. But this is where responsibility becomes non-negotiable. Bedtime is not the place for excess. Poor dilution or high doses can irritate digestion, disrupt sleep, or harm dental health. The point is not more, it's precise use in the right context. The same principle applies across biology and life. The closer you get to the margins, the more accuracy matters. Used correctly, apple cider vinegar before bed becomes a nudge rather than a force, supporting regulation without interference. Taken together with the earlier timing strategies, this completes a cycle. Preparing the body before eating, orienting it at the start of the day, and supporting regulation at night. Each step reinforces the same message: order is built, not hoped for. End your day the way you want to begin the next, deliberately, responsibly, and with just enough intention to let biology do the rest.